Good afternoon, everyone. I am June Rawl, the director for IPDAY, and I'm so happy that all of you could join us today for our webinar, CASAS Tips and Tricks, Access, Analyze, and Instruct. Today, we're going to dive into effective CASAS practices that will accelerate some learning outcomes for your students. I'm joined today by our newest member of IPDAY, our state director, IPDAY SME, Dr. Daisy Shaw. Daisy is an operations specialist at Palm Beach County Public Schools. Like I said, she is a CASAS state trainer and IPDAY trainer, and also has been doing some fantastic work around the state. So we welcome you, Dr. Daisy Shaw. We're so happy that you're here to join us today. Before we get started, I will let you know of some housekeeping things to remember. Remember that your microphones are muted, but we want you to ask questions. So put your questions into the Q&A. Dr. Shaw will be analyzing and looking at those questions throughout the presentation, and we'll try to get to all of them before the end. I want to also remind you that this presentation is archived and will be available on the IPDAY website within 48 hours. There is a handbook that will support this presentation. It's already downloaded on the IPDAY website. So if you haven't already grabbed it, make sure you go back to it and look for it. So Daisy, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, and welcome and thank you so much for facilitating our webinar today.
Thank you, June, for that wonderful introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this afternoon. So here are our agenda items for today. I will provide a brief overview on all things CASAS prior to sharing promising practices on what to do before, during, and after testing day. And last but not least, I will also share some efficient resources with you before concluding today's session. All right, so before we move on to the next slide, could you please utilize the chat box and let me know what you think the acronym CASAS stands for? So just go ahead and type that in the chat box. What do you think CASAS stands for? Dr. Servos, yes. Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment System. So I see some answers are coming in. Again, all you're doing at this time is answering a question in the chat box. What does CASAS stand for? Again, if you don't know what it is, it's fine. If you do, that's great. All right, so all of you are absolutely right. CASAS stands for Comprehensive Adult Student Assessment Systems, and it provides testing of basic and academic skills for youth and adults and curriculum tools for you to design instruction. Okay. And now what I'm going to have you do is if you could scan the QR code that appears on your screen and go to menti.com, you will have to answer 2 simple questions. If you do not want to scan the QR code, you can certainly go to www.menti.com and enter the code that is appearing on the slide right now, and that code is 65081477. And on the presenter side, or if you were to use this in the classroom as on the teacher side, this is what I'm getting to see, right? So I am collecting real-time data here. And a bar graph, that is one of our CASAS task areas. Whether you teach ESOL or ABEGED, your students need to know how to interpret the data that is available on a bar graph, okay? The second question is, do you administer eTests online, paper testing, or do you do both at your sites? Right, so 5 participants said that they only administer CASAS eTest online. All right, so this is a free version of Menti that I'm using. I often use this in my classroom prior to introducing a new topic or towards the end of a lesson. And like I said, as an instructor or a presenter, I'm getting to collect real-time data, and I can also run a report on how my students or my participants did. So it's a great tool. Check it out. And thank you guys for participating. So what you're seeing on the screen right now are approved CASAS reading and math goals. These are NRS approved CASAS reading and math goals assessment test series that we use for our ABE and ASC programs, right? The CASAS Reading Goals test series is aligned to the CCR standards for adult education and CASAS competencies. This particular test series measures rigorous academic skills and context relevant to lives of adult learners. Okay. The national average test time for reading goals pre and post test is 45 minutes. That's a national average. The 4 levels provide sufficient placement opportunities to provide the most accurate diagnostic information to guide instruction. Now on the next screen, what you're going to see are the math goals tests. Okay, the math goals test is 60 minutes for levels A and B and 75 minutes for levels C and D. And the test content is aligned with the college and career readiness standards for adult education and the CASAS math standards. Calculators are allowed and embedded into eTests online. You may provide your students with a basic calculator if they prefer to use a physical calculator, that is. You could also provide them with a scratch paper. Just be sure to collect it back and shred it upon test completion. So at this time, all agencies are using the CASAS Life and Work series for their ESL programs. Life and work assessments correlate to CASAS competencies and to CASAS content standards. Now, the STEPS assessment. STEPS, at least for now, is still pending approval. So the CASAS reading and listening steps, and STEPS stands for Student Test of English Progress and Success. STEPS assessment is aligned with the English Language Proficiency Standards, the ELPs, for adult education, and includes 5 test levels to support improved accuracy, resulting in better student outcomes. But this is still pending approval, but we will be using this in the near future. Okay, that's the CASAS STEPS assessment. So the Life and Work Reading 80 series, there are 4 levels of pre and post tests from level A to level D, and students have up to an hour to complete their test. Life and Work Listening series, there are 3 levels of pre and post tests from level A to level C, and tests take between 40 and 51 minutes to complete. So the raw score is the number of questions a student answers correctly, but for placement and reporting purposes, we always use the scale score. Scale score is a 3-digit number, all right, that we obtain once our students have taken the CASAS test. Each test form has its own raw to scale score chart. These charts are in the test administration manuals, or we call them TAMs, for each CASAS test series. For example, the chart that you're currently looking at, on this chart, a raw score of 12 is a scale score of 213. So raw score of 12 is a scale score of 213, right? All right, now let's look at some strategies to follow before the testing day. Intake and orientation is your opportunity to welcome students to your program and determine their needs, their goals, skill levels, and education and work backgrounds. The CASAS intake process is an optional, informal, and non-standardized process. So what that means is that although CASAS has an intake process that they recommend, we may still have to follow additional state and local requirements and policies in order to best serve our adult learners. Please keep in mind that our students are our customers, so be sure to provide them with quality customer service from the day they first make that initial phone call to obtain information about your program or the first time they set foot on your campus. Create a welcoming environment where students feel comfortable. During the busy weeks of registration, be prepared with supplies, any forms that you want them to fill out, and the appropriate intake tools. In an effort to reduce or prevent test anxiety, our sites conduct an assessment orientation here in Palm Beach County. This is when we communicate with students and provide them with a brief synopsis on how the overall assessment process works. All right, so from intake to placement, so there are no surprises and the students are mentally and emotionally prepared. This differs from a student orientation where you communicate the expectations and policies with your students. The purpose of this assessment orientation is to make sure students understand the testing process and they're prepared for what's to follow and that they feel comfortable and that there is no test anxiety. With an effective intake and orientation process, programs can create a learning environment that works to determine students' needs, goals, skills levels, and education and work backgrounds. So tying it back to quality customer service and communication, we like to provide the students with some additional information before they go to the testing lab in an effort to reduce or prevent test anxiety. So we basically let them know that, hey, this is what the CASAS assessment is. It's going to take you about 2 hours to complete the overall assessment. It's all multiple choice. This is not a pass or fail assessment. It is for placement purposes. We want to place you in a level that is going to best meet your academic needs and where you are going to be most successful. We let them know that children, friends, or family members are not allowed in the testing lab. So please prepare and make arrangements accordingly. We also let them know that we want them to feel comfortable. So make sure you bring a jacket or something if you're going to be testing in a cold lab. And we certainly also let them know which lab to report to. And some of our sites, what they do is they'll have volunteers available during the week of registration and testing. And these volunteers will walk the students to the computer lab that they are to report to. Okay. However, if the student is unable to stay the same day, they took the same day that they registered to take the CASAS assessment, we provide them with a CASAS assessment flyer, and that's what you're seeing on your screen right now. So if a student came in to register, but they can't stay to take the test, we provide them with this flyer. It tells them exactly what they need to know about the CASAS assessment in 3 different languages. And the back side of this form, the second page, there is a ticket that a staff member would fill out so the student knows when to return to take the test. So this is the ticket that a staff member would fill out before handing this flyer to the student. To ensure that our proctors are prepared to administer the test, the coordinators will often provide them with completed test tickets, such as the ones you see on the screen right now. This way, the proctors know how many students they are expecting that day, what sessions to activate, and also students' demographic information is available on the ticket. So there aren't any inconsistencies with like the ID numbers and such. So this particular ticket is for our ESOL program. This ticket is for our ABE-GED program. Some of the sites, instead of using a ticket, they will use a simple list so proctors can get the labs ready prior to students' arrival. Okay. So as you can see, this is something we would provide to our ESOL proctors, and this is something we would provide to our goals proctors. As you might already know, CASAS eTests Online can be administered on Windows 10 and 11 computers, Chromebooks, and iPads, but these devices must meet or exceed certain requirements. Touchscreen devices such as iPads are particularly helpful with students that have lower computer literacy skills. Now, there are several different help documents that are available on the CASAS website to help you get started, so be sure to check them out if you want to. Go ahead and check out that CASAS training materials library. All right, but regardless of what devices you're using, you want to make sure that they are functioning as expected and are set up for testing prior to students' arrival in the lab, right? Same with headphones. When administering a listening test, it is crucial to provide students with a quality pair of functioning headphones. While we appreciate Burlington English, please be aware that Burlington headsets are not suitable for administering listening tests since they only provide sound on one side. Okay. Additionally, it is essential to perform a volume check to ensure that the audio is functioning properly. So before your students get there, make sure you plug those headphones in and do a quick sound check to make sure the volume is up and working. For your math test, if administering the math test, there is an on-screen calculator available that the student may use throughout the entire math test. Before students begin the math test, proctors should provide them with a pencil and a scratch paper. Be sure to collect this back and shred the scratch paper upon test completion. If a student wants to use a physical calculator, you may provide them with a basic calculator. They cannot, all right, they cannot use their personal calculator, nor can they use a calculator on their cell phones. That is not allowed. Now, this is just a quick overview of all the information that I have covered so far. Just ensure that proctor station and student testing stations are ready for testing ahead of time. Determine what test a student needs to take based on the intake. Have headphones, calculators, papers, and pencils available if administering the listening and math assessment. Preparing in advance will minimize the occurrence of last-minute issues and facilitate a seamless start to the test administration. Okay, now let's talk about testing day. On the day of the test, it is crucial for test administrators to maintain a positive attitude in order to foster a conducive testing environment. The demeanor of administrators can have a significant impact on students' test performance. And what CASAS recommends is that you test no more than 20 to 25 students per proctor. So for example, if you are testing, say, 40 students in one lab, 2 proctors are needed. It is important to approach testing with a positive attitude. Remind students that during the test, cell phones, dictionaries, translators, or any other items are strictly prohibited. Kindly request students to turn off their cell phones and clear their tables of all personal belongings. Emphasize that they should refrain from talking or seeking assistance from others during the test. And as far as guessing is concerned, you want to advise your students to skip any test items they're unsure about and proceed to the next question. So they're not to guess, they're to simply leave a question blank and move on to the next one if they don't know the answer. You could tell your students that if they guess, their test results may not accurately reflect their skills and abilities, and they might be placed at a level that is either too easy for them or maybe too difficult for them. Okay. And about test timing. So encourage your students to utilize the entire recommended time allocated for each test and test type. If a student is facing difficulties with the computer, and which we know happens from time to time, right? If a student is facing difficulties with using the computer, consider using a device with a touchscreen interface to assist them. Now, if you do not have a touchscreen, you as a coordinator or as an administrator or as a proctor may need to provide personalized computer orientation, including basic tasks such as practicing how to use a mouse. Okay. Utilizing the CASAS eTest sampler can be a valuable tool for students to practice and familiarize themselves with the test format, enabling them to know what to expect. Again, it is essential to remain patient and maintain a positive attitude throughout the process. So you can use the CASAS eTest sampler from any web browser. That's what you're looking at right now on your screens. Utilize these sample test items to familiarize students with CASAS test items and provide them with the practice in answering similar questions. Enhance the smoothness of future testing sessions by familiarizing students with the test format and expectations. And reduce student test anxiety by providing them with an opportunity to become more comfortable with the testing process. All right, so you can simply Google CASAS eTest sampler, or you can go to the link that is available on this slide, and it'll bring you to the sampler and the test items. It is crucial to actively proctor while administering the test. During the testing session, ensure active circulation to monitor the students. Verify that each student is working independently and not engaging in any form of collaboration. They cannot be talking while taking the test. Regularly check on students to ensure they're progressing through the test at an appropriate pace. You want to make sure that the students are answering questions and moving forward. Okay. And now let's see what has to happen once the students are done testing, once they've taken the test. So first and foremost, proctors must collect any scrap paper from the math tests, okay? If you're administering the math test and your students are done, you want to make sure you collect that paper and shred it. And for testing security purposes, it is critical that all students have logged out of eTest online. So once your students are done testing, you want to make sure they log out of eTest online. And once that is done, you as a proctor are going to have to stop all testing sessions from your proctor console. So you're going to go ahead and stop the sessions, and doing so will ensure that tests remain secure and inaccessible. And after all of that is done, you may then proceed to retrieve test results from either eTest online or by generating reports in TOPS Pro Enterprise, TE. Every test form has a unique raw to scale score conversion. Like I mentioned earlier, raw score is a number of correct answers on a test, and scale score is that 3-digit number that we use for placement and reporting purposes. The below accurate range, that's when you see that asterisk. These scores points are below the accurate range of a test form and marked with an asterisk. Retesting may be necessary to get an accurate range score. Now, the accurate range score, these score points are within the accurate range of a test form. These are valid scores. Valid pre-test results can be used to set the baseline score for measuring growth at time of the next test. And valid post-test results can be used to document learning gains. And sometimes we will see a diamond next to a scale score. Diamond scores are a conservative estimate of the ability of students who perform very well on a test form. So basically the test was too easy for the student. Okay, that's what a diamond represents. Now for retesting guidelines, refer to FDOE's policy and be sure to check with your local agencies as well. All right. So again, make sure you refer to DOE's retesting policy and check with your local agency as well. At this time, you're looking at the NRS EFLs and CASAS reading goal scores, score ranges for ABE and ASC. Now, on this slide, you are looking at the NRS EFLs and CASAS math goals score ranges for ABE and ASC. All right, now we're gonna take a look at some of the valuable resources that are available to us as adult educators. Right, so first let's talk about the CASAS curriculum. Content standards, competencies, and task areas. All three of these are integral components of CASAS test item development. The standards help instructors identify the underlying basic and academic skills embedded in CASAS competencies. The competencies provide instructional objectives, direct links to test content for monitoring learning, criteria for program evaluation, and a reference system for instructional materials. And last but not least, the task areas are the written and graphic prompts that appear on the CASAS assessment. Remember, this is not just a reading comprehension test, or students, they need to know how to read graphs and charts and pay stubs and maps and schedules and so on and so forth. And they need to know how to interpret the data that is available on these different task areas too. So here are the CASAS content standards and task areas, and you want to encourage your teachers to familiarize themselves with these standards and the formats in which the items are presented. Teachers are encouraged to use instructional materials that correlate to the CASAS standards, competencies, and task areas. Through the competencies, teachers can identify curriculum materials that target specific learning needs at appropriate instructional levels. So say, for example, if you were going to introduce a unit of health, okay, you can simply bring this up. This screenshot was taken from Public's weekly ad. Okay, or if you're going to be going over the unit of employment, you can use this as your picture prompt to start your lesson. All right, these are just some ideas. And they all correlate to CASAS standards and competencies. So CASAS recommends that teachers incorporate the CASAS competencies into their lessons to meet the needs of their students. And to help them get started, a CASAS competencies document is available on the CASAS website. And I have also included this in the webinar document that is already uploaded onto IPDay's website. So make sure you check that out. All right, so to deliver data-driven instruction in their classrooms, teachers should use TOPS Pro Enterprise. Now, if teachers do not have access to TOPS Pro Enterprise or TE, it would be ideal to provide them with the reports within a week of testing. So here I have included some of my personal favorite reports. You can run some of these reports by student or by class as a whole. The personal score report gives a summary of the student's results on a test taken with eTests. The next assigned test report tells you exactly what test the student is going to take when they take the next test in the future. Data from this particular report is useful in planning group activities and assigning work based on the student's NATs. The competency reports help teachers focus their instruction on the competencies most needed by an individual student or the entire class. The Content Standard Performance Report helps identify the underlying basic skills content standards assessed on a test form. The Individual Skills Profile shows student or class performance in a number of areas, including task areas. And a high school equivalency predictor will display automatically if the student achieved an appropriate score to indicate the likelihood of passing an HSE test. Right, so that report is the Individual Skills Profile report. So just like K-12, right? Elementary, high school, and middle, even in adult ed, we never want to teach to the test. It is recommended that we use the data from TE to target instruction. We can use the curriculum and resources that are available, such as the sample test items, to prepare our students for the test. Avoid the following inappropriate practices while preparing your students. Teaching solely focused on particular test items rather than comprehensive subject matter. Teaching specific vocabulary solely based on test items rather than broader language development, and restricting the curriculum to only cover topics that will be tested rather than providing a well-rounded education. So the last 3 points, they are no-nos. The 2023-2024 Adult Education Curriculum Frameworks are now available on the DOE's website. Be sure to check them out and plan your lessons accordingly. For my fellow ESOL teachers, the Adult ESOL Curriculum Framework consists of 4 interrelated blueprints. All right, and the first one is going to be our English language proficiency standards for adult education and the Florida Adult Basic Education Reasoning Through Language Art standards. 2, Florida DOE Life and Work Competencies. 3, prerequisite ESOL literacy skills, and 4, civic standards. So all of these components are part of the frameworks for ESOL, right? But again, like I said, all the curriculum frameworks for ESOL, the academic skill building, and the adult basic education programs are available on the DOE's website. Here in Palm Beach County, for our ESOL programs, we use the standout curriculum, which correlates to the CASAS standards and competencies. Teachers use this curriculum to focus on all the essential skills such as reading, writing, listening, and speaking in their ESOL classes. In our ESOL programs, we also utilize Burlington English. And one of my favorite features on Burlington English is Prepare for CASAS. I use the in-class lessons, during class for whole group activities. And since the first week of class, what I like to do is I like to start using the test practice feature in class. So basically, I will go ahead and project 3 to 5 reading questions and 3 to 5 listening questions each day in class. So my students get to practice and prepare for the test. Again, they are getting used to the test format and seeing different task areas and different types of questions each day. Additionally, this is my time as their teacher to teach them the test-taking tips and tricks. And my favorite one is, make sure you always read the question first, know what you're looking for, because if you've ever been in a testing environment, you know some of our students will read the graphic or that written prompt for 20 minutes before they even read the question, right? And I don't want my students to be making that mistake. I want them to read the question first so they know what they're looking for in that graphic or written prompt. And some of our sites, they will actually use the practice test on Burlington English as a midterm. So one day in the middle of the term, each class will have the opportunity to go to the computer lab and take the reading and listening test in Burlington English, and the instructors use this data for midterm progress check. Okay, so that is a promising practices at some of our sites. And over the last few years, several of our students have taken a CASAS field test of some type here in Palm Beach County. In the past, we've also used CASAS field testing opportunity as a midterm practice test, and that is because our students are getting to practice and they're getting familiar with the format and the features that eTest Online has to offer. Field testing also helps reduce test anxiety, and our students are more confident and better prepared for the actual post-test. And when our students are better prepared for that post-test, we are most likely to see more learning gains at the end of the term, so more MSGs. And of course, students receive a gift card for each test that they take. For each field test that our students take, they get a free gift card. So it's a win-win. And in the webinar document, I have included information about who you should contact if you have questions or if you are interested in learning more about the current field testing opportunities. In my classroom, I also like to use these 4 formative assessment tools to test my students after a lesson or a unit. So I use the free version for all 4 of these tools. They are highly interactive. My students get extremely competitive, and we have fun while learning. But basically, if you Kahoot is the most commonly used formative assessment tool out of the 4. If you've ever used Kahoot, same idea with Gimkit and Blookit as well. The only difference is with Gimkit and Blookit, the students are getting to see the question right then and there on their devices. Okay, and there are some pre-made Gimkits, Blookits, and Kahoots available that you can easily go in and modify to meet the needs of your students. And if you could just utilize the chat box and let me know if you have ever used any of these formative assessment tools. Can I get a Kahoot or a Mentimeter or a Gimkit and a Blookit or all of the above? All right, I see a lot of you have used Kahoot. That's great. Like I said, it is one of the super popular ones and our students love it. All of the above. Renee, way to go. All right. Okay, and I'm just looking at the chat here, and if anyone has any kind of questions pertaining to the FDOE frameworks, feel free to contact Phil Anderson. He's included his email in the chat box and his phone number as well. So again, if you have any questions about the curriculum frameworks, reach out to Mr. Phil Anderson. Kahoot and Blookit. All right, thank you guys for participating there. So now, what I like to do with my students time to time is that I like to use an exit ticket at the end of a lesson to ensure that my students understood the content that was covered in the classroom. But for training purposes today, I'm going to have you guys scan the QR code that you see on your screen and complete a brief survey. All right. If you're having difficulty with the QR code for some reason, just let me know and I'll go ahead and share a link with you so you can fill out this brief survey. And while you're completing the exit ticket, I see some questions in the Q&A section here. Do you recommend telling students their scores? So yes, I actually will sit down with my students one-on-one and have data chats with them where I will show them what their current scores are, where they currently stand. And then we also do goal setting. And that's when I tell them, like, this is where I need you to be at the end of the term. Like, I need you to move on to the next level and all of that. So yes, feel free to share the student scores with them, but make sure you consult with your site administrator before you do that. In our district, our administrators are usually open to us having data chats with our students and sharing their data with them. Okay. There was another question. Do you recommend ventures text as well as standout? It just depends from county to county. Some counties do use ventures, and that's fine as well. Some use standout, and they're both perfectly fine for the ESOL program. Can you share the link? Yes, absolutely. Let me go ahead and share the link with you. Jean, yes, I do use my own goal setting worksheet. It has like images and it has some text, not a lot, because a lot of my ESOL students are visual learners. So if you want that, just shoot me an email and I will promise I will have it to you. I'll send it to you. I just sent the link in the chat box. All right, at this time, if there aren't any additional questions, I am going to turn it over to June.
Thank you so much, Daisy. So you have another survey that I'd like for you to take. We just want to make sure that this content was relevant to your daily role in adult education. If you could just take a minute to fill this out, we would appreciate it. While you're doing that, I want to remind you that next Wednesday on June 28th at 3 p.m., we will have a webinar that's titled Tapping into the Funds of Knowledge of Our Adult ESOL Learners. So thank you. We would love to have you join us next Wednesday at 3 p.m. Until then, thank you so much for attending today's webinar. Thank you, Daisy. And I want to wish you all a great rest of your afternoon. Take care.